Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Conqueror, Enemy of the Self, the first graphic novel in the Shadow of the Conqueror graphic novel adaptation by Shad and Brooks with the artist Mike S. Miller. And yeah, we're just going to be talking, especially about the differences between the novel and the graphic novel, because I did go into this expecting differences. Usually in adaptations there are differences, and I'm going to get into like the expectations in a little bit before we get into the comic. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story or a fragment using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in the creativity that was the Lemoy submissions. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, and you submit the first chapter and the cover to the Fresh Meat feature. They'll be read here on the channel at some random interval to hopefully help more readers that enjoy what you do find your work, because you know, everybody's audience is not the same exact audience. No writer can satisfy literally everybody. And so what I try to do is just give variety, give as much spread to the various things being done out there, and hopefully help the readers find that you exist, because I promise you they are out there. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, roast me, feel free. Of all things, I do not promise that you will enjoy them. They are what they are. But you can get them at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library. If you don't want to pay for them, just request them, or OneDrive, you know. But with that said, let's jump into this. So last January actually, I read Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad and Brooks. Before that, I had no idea who he was, but he showed up on my Twitter because he was getting in fights about generative AI, and I discovered that he had written a book. So I was like, okay, let's go see what you can do. So then I read that book, and the full discussion is here on the channel. And then I saw that there was a graphic novel adaptation that was coming. It's going to be in multiple parts. I have no idea how many parts it's going to be, because I think that the website said a 3-part arc for this first story. But based on this first graphic novel, it's going to take a lot more than that to get through all of it. It might just be the first part of a bunch of arcs, because there is a lot of content in Shadow of the Conqueror. Shadow of the Conqueror is like 600 pages. But I wasn't initially interested in doing the comic until I got thinking. I am very curious about what he's determined to do with Lyra and Cusick, especially, because Lyra, I feel like, was the most disrespected character in that entire novel. And when you're taking a book from a novel to a graphical novel, yeah, you're bringing some of your fans over from having gotten the novel, but you're changing it into a different format. You're getting some of the comic artists fans who are going to want to look at his art, and then you're bringing it to comic fans in general who might be interested in this, but they wouldn't be interested in the novel. And so you're going to be getting coverage to new fans. And so I don't know if they're going to have the same experience with Cusick and Lyra that I had in the novel, and I was curious how it was going to be dealt with, especially considering Cusick is a character that is from a culture that is known for dressing in nothing. And that makes me wonder if he's even going to be included in the graphic novel, period. And if he is, then is he going to be drawn naked, or is he not? What kind of variations in the book versus the comic are we going to see? What things are going to get cut? How is the story going to be worked together? Because just like with a movie adaptation, you're going to end up pulling things out. You're going to end up inserting different things. You're going to expedite things. You're going to make things work differently for the visual form. And that's what I was curious about. But the most curious thing was I wanted to know what he was going to do with Lyra. So if anybody is unaware who Lyra is and what happens to Lyra in the novel. So Dalen the Conqueror is somebody who is charged with 27 million murders when he was the dictator of Dayless Land, the Dawn Empire. 27 million murders and 420 something rapes of girls as young as 14. Now that was a big thing, because the design for this character was to make him as bad as possible and to see if the worst person possible could be redeemed, as that's what I've learned through the process of having read Shadow of the Conqueror. And so, yeah, he never went younger than 14, so there was that. And you know what? He gave them roads and outlawed slave child labor. So those are his defenses. And those defenses are brought up in this book, by the way, in this graphic novel, by the way. We'll get to that. We're going to go through the whole of the graphic novel, so you're going to get to see some stuff. But I have a lot of thoughts as we go through, and the pacing is really terrible in this graphic novel because I feel like I got so much more, obviously, so much more background because I read the novel, but the scenes in this kind of jump, and I think it could have been made much smoother. But then I also feel like there's a character in here. Now, this is totally supposition, so I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've read the graphic novel, if you've read the novel, what you think about it, because there was something really off about this new inserted character that was not in the book at all, and then suddenly showed up in this book, and the specific things that he said and the specific outcome for him, like, stick with me. And I want to know your thoughts on that character specifically. I'll let you know mine when we get there. But so, Daedalus the Conqueror, super huge war criminal of sorts. You know, he got chased out of society once they overthrew him, and then he hid in a cave, and then he killed himself, and then he becomes young again, right? And so Lyra was one of the Arknights, along with her partner Kusig, who were tasked with tracking down this younger version of Dalen, thinking that it was Dalen's son, thinking that he had these Arknight powers. They needed to bring him into the Arknights, because if you have these powers, you have to be an Arknight. So they go and chase him down. Lyra was one of his rape victims, where when she was 14 and he was in his 60s, maybe 58, 59, he raped her, got her pregnant, she had an abortion, and then she got to the point where she could not have a child because of all of that which happened. So then she was like 34 in the book when she reunited with Dalen, I'm pretty sure mid-30s. And she is also tasked with this partner named Kusig, who's of a certain culture that in order to show your restraint and the control that you have over yourself, his people walk around naked. And that is to show that you can resist your urges when you're looking at other people whom you are sexually attracted to. Now, imagine for a second placing the rape victim who still has a rape response with this guy who is always naked. So there's that. There's also the point midway through the book where Lyra keeps like looking. Lyra actually runs into Dalen and sees him and sees that he looks just like the guy who raped her and is like freaking out. And Dalen actually gaslights her into apologizing to him for assuming that he was his father. And he tells her, his victim, she doesn't know that this is the same person, but he tells her that Dalen was not that bad, despite what people think. Like, so he gets his own rape victim to apologize to him for assuming and feeling and responding poorly to him. And then in order to cure this huge rape response she has where she just kind of starts crying around him, and then later she finds out, oh, she was lied to and this is Dalen the Conqueror and she's having a breakdown, everybody around her just repeats, Lyra, you're an Arknight, you're a strong woman. And then she repeats, I'm a strong woman. And then she stops crying and then her trauma is fixed. So, there were vibes that was going to become an eventual love interest, which is also very bizarre considering if you look at the situation where she was 14 and he was near his 60s when they first had sex, and who knows how long she was around. And then he became 80 and then she's, mid 30s. Now he's got a 17-year-old face with a 30-year-old body. And so then if you've got a 17-year-old with a 34-year-old, if that was eventually going to, but he's actually an 80-year-old. The whole thing is just like, what the hey? So I was curious how he was going to do that and how he was going to convince other people to get on board with that. It looks like the whole rape situation with Lyra has been retconned, and I don't mind. So this is another thing that I want to get into before I get into the comic, is I don't care if an author or a creator decides, hey, I have this property, I want to try something else with it, and go with it. We see that with the what if situations in Marvel, and does DC do the what ifs? We see it with the twisted anthologies or the twisted stories by Disney where they're saying, hey, what if this other thing happened? And then they just take a different take on their fairy tales. And then we see it with stuff like the creator of Scott Pilgrim saying, well, I have a movie, I have a comic book, I want to do something else with the show. Totally fine. Just say that you're doing something else with the show. And I don't know if the author of Shadow of the Conqueror has just straight up said, hey, I am taking a completely different direction with some of this stuff, but I have seen him do a video that pretty much called all of the critical reviews of his book BS and skipped over them and called them illegitimate while saying that the 5 stars were the only good ones. And so that's where I more have an issue with, if you're gonna retcon a story to appease some of the things that you saw in the critical reviews because you saw some legitimacy to the criticisms, then saying all criticisms are BS while also quietly editing it, kind of smarmy. But so that's what I think. Now, I'm also gonna go ahead and say I still freaking hate Dalen's character. I think that Dalen's character could have had an interesting story arc, and I still think that you could have gone with making Dalen a redemptionless jerk or having him be somebody who struggled to be a better person, but I still don't think that Shad had the help that he needed or the skill that he needed to craft this the way that it should be. And the pushing things together really just shows the parts that don't work. But let's go ahead and get into the comic. Right here, we're starting with the first page, and I did want to read the first page where we get the introduction to Dalen. Don't worry, I'm not going to read every single page, though we are going to skip through them, and it'll illustrate what is going on in the story, and then I'll kind of tell you what's going on. So my name is Dalen Namaran, but most called me the Great Bastard, the scourge of the nation, Dalus the Conqueror. Yes, contrary to what most people believe, I'm not dead. Are you surprised? Do you think that I've somehow escaped punishment? Well, rest assured, I haven't. The 20 years I've spent in hiding have been torture. Death would have offered the rest I desire and saved me from the endless guilt. Yes, that's right. I, Dalus the Conqueror, agree that I am despicable tyrant the world claims. I murdered, raped, pillaged, and ravaged the world, all in the name of the Dawn Empire. I know that I could never be forgiven for what I've done, and as meaningless as the words are, I'm sorry. So immediately he's appealing to the readership, to the audience, to say that he is sorry, and like, I know that this can sometimes be hard for people to understand, but if you're going to tell me that you're sorry, you need to show me that you're sorry, because I'm not somebody who just believes you. So it's already a hard pill for me to swallow, and I'm going to say, obviously, because I've read the novel, that I do not believe that he is sorry, as he's telling me that for 20 years he has suffered, and he has just been in hiding and he has suffered. I don't think he suffered guilt. I think he suffered boredom and loneliness because he is obviously somebody that likes attention. He obviously likes to be adored, and very few want him. Now, a couple of things come to mind also immediately with this, and I was thinking it over and having discussions with others that so obviously not everybody in the universe hates Dalen the Conqueror, because there are daylights. There are whatever that cult was called of people that still like him. There are going to be areas on this map, you would think, that highly benefited from what Dalen did, that they really, really still liked him. So he could have gone and lived with them in those areas and likely been protected after his fall. But he didn't. Instead, he went to hide in a cave. And you might say, well, that's because he was ashamed. Okay, but he didn't do anything to repent. He didn't give money to these places to try to rebuild these places. He just hid from all of the people that would hold him accountable for his actions. So maybe 20 years ago, it hadn't started out as being sorry. Maybe 20 years ago, it started out as he didn't have an army and he was a chicken shit, because obviously it's immediately after you fall and your ship is burned down. You're probably angry as opposed to guilty feeling. And you could sit in your room all by yourself and percolate on the things that you've done. But I don't think that someone like this would be guilty for 20 years and not take action and then suddenly go, I'm 82, time to kill myself. Because we get to this next page. So he's talking about what he did, where they conquered and they fought these nightshades, and they fought these shades, which are just kind of like zombie-like creatures that people turn into. It's, for me, even in the novel, it was a very random addition. I didn't really understand where it came from or why it came that way, because you've got then the mixture of the shade situation and the Dalen conquering everything, because then after you talk about, oh, the shades attacked, yeah, and the shades were killing people as they were turning stuff into people, and there was this whole army about it. Well, we conquered it. I became a hero by fighting the shades, and then after fighting the shades, I also started to take money from the aristocracy so that I could feed and pay the poor people, and then the aristocracy hated me for taking their money and killed my wife and child. So basically he was a Robin Hood of sorts, and they killed his wife and child, so he killed all the aristocrats and then assumed a position of power. So then at that point, he could distribute the wealth and all of that noise. And then at some point, after having gotten to this position of power and redistributing wealth, then he gets taken down by somebody else, Reatin Leusa, who is another character who is not mentioned in the novel. That guy came up against Dalen. Oh my gosh, is that another retcon? Okay, we're gonna get to that. That guy came up against Dalen and kicked Dalen out, and then Dalen was off on his own. So in the novel, the person that actually ran up against Dalen was Eric the Lightbringer, who we're going to meet later in this, because the two main characters that end up joining Dalen on his quest of everything, of like getting his new identity, are Lyra, a woman that he raped, and Eric, a man who was leading the revolution against him, got him kicked out of power, and Dalen had also killed Eric's wife and child. So apparently that's been changed to make a completely different character to take that damage off of Eric as well. And so with all of that background force-fed onto you, Dalen is now thinking, you know, this is also doesn't make any sense. So he's standing here on the edge of the cliff that he's going to throw himself off of, and he says, I'm 82 years old. My body is finally dying, which I welcome as a long-awaited but undeserved gift. I have only a few falls left, but if I am to die, I'll see it done my own way. The world should be free of Dallas the Conqueror once and for all. To the end, I plan to cast myself from the continent. My body will fall forever past the continent as it loops through the barrier every 24 hours, carried away into the infinite sky. I know, poetic. It's well known one dies if touching either dark stone or sunstone while passing through the barrier, the very border of the universe. Crossing it, one would re-enter from the other side. So if touching either stone kills you, touching both must be worse. I deserve a painful and sure death. So a couple of things are wrong here. Number one, he's like, okay, well, I think that I should die for what I've done, but also I've waited until, you know, I was 82 years old because my body is finally failing me. And I'm not going to let God be the one to take me out. I'm not going to be the one to let nature take me out. I am going to be the one to take me out. That is not you believing that you deserve justice or that you deserve to die. That is just you being a control freak up until the end, where you should be the one to pull the plug. It is weak reasoning. Now, if you want to just say that you're a narcissist, that's totally fine. Just be a narcissist, Dalen. The second thing is that he says the second thing is that he says that his death should be painful and sure, but then he decides to not use a surefire way to kill himself and instead does one that says, well, if this thing does kill you, well, then this other thing must be worse. By the way of saying this thing must be worse, it means he doesn't actually know if it's worse. So he's actually changing the sure death that he says he deserves for something that he thinks is going to be torturously more, but he's not exactly sure how it's going to turn out. Again, if we're gonna retcon stuff already, like, you might as well change some other things. The intro of this book actually very changed where it started, how it started, because initially the novel opened up with him writing in a journal and talking about how he was so sorry for what he did. And this is why I initially did not believe him as anything but a liar in the novel. Is he says how sorry he is in the novel, but then he writes in a book how much he hates this other race of people. And so then he's going to write lies in there to, like, get them for being people who have sex with goats, so that even in death, his enemies can suffer. And so I'm like, how sorry are you if even on your deathbed, you're like, I want to cause pain to people after I die? You're not really sorry. Like, it's a show. Anyway, in the book, he writes his journal, puts it down, goes outside, meets the Lightbringer there, because the Lightbringer is kind of just standing around waiting for his duty, and Dalen is going on a wagon. Oh yeah, this totally got rid of the fight at the very beginning. That was Dalen showing off that he could still fight, because he got healed at the beginning. Then the guy that he was getting the wagon ride from to get on a ship to get to the edge of the world to jump off, that guy challenges him to a fight after Eric healed him. And then they had a sword battle where he proved that he was better, and then he kind of continued, and then he got it. So we missed all of that, which is fine. I don't think you need all of that stuff. But for me, this is kind of a dramatic take where it's just giving you some exposition and his quick background to also try to make him seem like a good-ish person before he throws himself off, and then immediately he becomes young. But this is also a super jarring transition. So here he is falling off of this. Now in the book, he falls off, he wakes up on the ground, he messes around with his powers for a little bit, he then runs into the matronology people and stays in their barn and talks to the women a little bit and judges them for the men being pansies and the women being fat and in charge of everything. And then he leaves and the son follows out and says, hey, you're so cool, I want to follow along with you. And Dalen is like, no, go respect your parents. And so then he continues on and he gets to a city where he runs into a hobo when he's sleeping outside in an alleyway, and then he kills the hobo. So we miss all of that in this. We don't see him travel, which I think is the more important thing, because we just see him falling. And then on the very next page, it says one fall 24 hours later. So he just immediately skips from falling into being in this random alleyway with this guy attacking him, or with him attacking Dalen, and we have no idea what instigated this fight. But Dalen is so violent about it that you would think that it was Dalen who instigated it, or this guy was like, this guy doesn't even have a weapon anywhere. So you don't know what's going on, and Dalen is known as being a conqueror, and it would be totally fine to see him go this hard. Like, I don't even mind this if we actually make Dalen just be as bad as he has always been. But we have no context for this scene, which means we could have probably had another page that just shows him being like, what the hell? Why am I young again? What is my purpose? So at the bottom of this page, if we follow down the right side where it says, and this feeling, light drawing into my body, filling me, bursting with power. Has the light actually given me a second chance at life? And if so, could I really be a better man? I think that a better choice here would have been to lean further into his narcissism and be like, bro, I am invincible. I can't die. Nobody freaking wants me to die. But shoot, I don't have any money. So then, like, you know, he just recovers from after falling, and he's going to the nearest city, and then he gets to the city. He can't afford to, like, stay in any of the hotels, so he drops into this alleyway, falls asleep, and then the guy attacks him. And so then that might have been one extra page of content. You could do more depending on how much you wanted to write it out. But one, it makes him not have the random thought of, I could be a better man, that then immediately goes into stabbing a hobo with no context. Where he's in like, oh no, I'm just as bad as I've ever been. Because he got covered in blood, and him worrying, oh no, I don't want to be like that anymore. I'm the same as tyrant as I ever was. Okay, but like 2 pages ago, you were suddenly saying that you weren't. And so we had no reason for him to have that realization, so it feels so bizarre. We have him being a Spider-Man senses over here. But so then, because of that situation with the hobo man, he runs away, needs a moment to be alone so he can think about, like, what is the reason that he's here? Why is he here? And I do like that. I wish that it hadn't had him have the realization or the thought on the previous page of trying to be a better person. So he could just be like, and actually, what I actually would have liked here, because there's a moment later in the book where he thinks, maybe this is why I was given a second chance. What I would have suggested here, him doing his regular thing, people may have seen the body and they're like, oh my gosh, and he's like, oh shoot, I gotta get out of here before they, do something to me. And then he's, on the rooftops looking at things being like, I wonder why I'm young again. What does the light want from me? And then he's like, oh shoot, I don't have my sword. I don't have any of my weapons, and I left that journal about my suicide. Oh my gosh, I need to get back to my house and collect my things before the neighbors go and ransack my house and think that I'm dead and take my stuff. And so then that would give him plenty of reason to get going, and also it keeps him involved in himself, following his path of how he has been so far. Instead, we get him being a little emo here, thinking about, well, why? Everything is so terrible, and why am I like this? And I can never get any better, but it's, you know what? I should be a better man because it's far better for me to go and kill bad people than for men with cleaner hands to kill bad people, And so then he's also on this roof looking into this window, seeing this woman here, and this is the only spot where Lyra shows up in this, by the way. So he comes in here and sees this woman, thinks of Lyra, and she has now been retconned into being somebody that he theoretically, it looks like he fell in love with after his wife and child were dead, and was a concubine of sorts, or was a fling of sorts, and then he realized that she was so innocent and so perfect. But she would be used as a weapon against him because his wife and child were used against him and killed by his enemies. And so he tells her to go away because he does actually care about her. So she has been completely retconned from a 14-year-old rape victim to somebody that he cares about and told her to go away. And then he's just like, she didn't even know that I loved her. One thing that stood out to me specifically with this page is, oh my gosh, I gotta fix this because you're not getting the whole, there we go. I didn't even realize that was so short. I am sorry. But one thing that I noted that stood out to me specifically with this page is that the way that Dalen is sitting. So this man is an 82-year-old man who was a fighter in his youth, who was a tyrant with so much charisma, so much strength, so much belief in himself, and yet he sits like an angsty teenager. He does not have any posture whatsoever of a warrior, of a man with confidence. And you would think, like, I have seen, even in video games with like freaking 20-year-olds, yes, I'm talking about Yakuza, you know, we got the guys that know what the frick is up, and they just got, you know, just the freaking spread up. You got all of that confidence of just in the posture, in the walk. It is, oh, the walks. You can tell when you're playing Yakuza, when you're playing Red Dead Redemption, they freaking know when they are dangerous, when they are sure of themselves, when they are not afraid. And how is that Dalen not that man? So anyway, these people see him on the rooftop, and he gets startled and tries to get down so that, you know, because they saw somebody on the roof, and he stops himself as he lands. And so then all of these people see his powers and they think that he's an Arcanite, so they start giving him all of this stuff. But there is this old man in the crowd who recognizes Dalen as looking like Dalen the Conqueror, and he's like, wait a second, I know you. But he quickly adjusts that to be like, oh, wait a second, I don't know you. You are correct. Here, take this dagger as an apology from me. Now, the dagger is actually a tracking device, and we are going to learn that this gentleman is actually somebody from Dalen's past. Now, this man right here is not actually in the novel. The name that he has is never actually mentioned, and this scene is all brand new. And this, for me, this character feels like an insert to respond to critics, at least some critics of the comic book. Now, let me know when we get there. I will tell you, because he will give you the reason, and you will have to let me know. But keep an eye on this gentleman right here. So then he runs inside to see this guy right here. This guy with the red hair is the new stand-in for the guy that forced Dalen out of power, the one, you know, that took over what Eric did. And he says, hey, I think Dalen is alive. I think I just saw him. I'm going to track him down. And this guy is like, bro, you know, freaking regret it, but whatever. Now, as you can see, we get like some more really random. There is no marking anywhere when this is going into a flashback or it's going into a different character. It just kind of shows up because we're looking at this page with this guy right here being like, I'm gonna go freaking after him. And then we're in this moment here, switching over to these women that are fighting, switching over to Dalen talking about these women fighting and how it was actually just people's faults that ruined his good plans because, you know, he was a great leader and he just didn't take into consideration with his perfect plans that humans don't go according to plan. We also get a flashback here for no random reason. We also get a random flashback here to make up for how Dalen ran into Eric that first time to get his legs healed. I don't know why it wasn't put at the beginning. I don't know why it was inserted here specifically because, again, it's just disruptive and it doesn't really flow very well for the narrative's sake. Because then he's just getting on board. He like thinks about how he was healed and then now how his body moves again, but then he just boards a ship to continue on going to his home again. And he's thinking about how in his leadership, you know, everybody was equal. Everybody might have been poor, but everybody was equal. And now if you look at these women, like there are some poor people and there are some not poor people. And at least I guess it's a good thing in this society that some people can succeed and other people will be poor instead of everybody sucking. But also he's like, praising himself for having gotten rid of the child working factories and child labor, and for giving free schooling to everybody to the point that children were smart enough to grow up and overthrow him. So he's like, things were not actually that bad underneath me, right? Right? Also, we got he continues to be his pompous self over here with, I wonder what those fat pompous ladies would think if they knew that they were sitting across from Daedalus the Conqueror. I bet that they would wet their dainties. So then he just gets off and he runs away using his powers, talking a little bit about how his powers work with the different bonds. And the bonds are really just, you know, you think and you think extra hard and you put the power onto those bonds. And so if you put like, you got 4 bonds, or at least Dalen has 4 bonds. So if he puts And think of those bonds, again, as 4 thoughts. So if you put 1 thought on running faster, then you run twice as fast. If you put 2 bonds on running faster, you run 4 times as fast. If you put 3 bonds on running faster, you run 8 times as fast. And if you put 4 bonds on running faster, you run 6 times as fast. And what is the bond? You literally just go, I'm thinking really hard about this thing, put power into it, and there you go. So then after he lands and where he was going, we head back over to this new guy over here who knows Dalen from his past, and we get the background of how they know each other. And that's because this guy used to be a sparring partner, a trusted confidant with Dalen, and put a bunch of scars on his shoulder by actually being a really good fighter. And there was some point in their fighting where he said, don't trust anybody. And eventually, within these 2 pages, Dalen decided that, hey, wait a second, him saying don't trust anybody was him admitting to me that he is going to betray me, so I have to take him out. And so he killed this guy's entire family and then was going to put him to death, but then the guy who was supposed to put him to death freed him, and then, you know, this poor guy right here ended up having his entire family murdered and himself murdered for sparing this guy, and that's where he is. So he is trying to get vengeance on having his entire life ruined, his family killed by Dalen, and Dalen doing it all over a lie and not trusting him. Then we switch again with no context, no separator, no reference to anything, to being Dalen arriving. So again, like, the transitions in this are very bizarre and very abrupt and just very... But so Dalen has now reached his home, and Eric the Lightbringer is still out there. This is the man that healed his legs, and we didn't get to actually see him except for in that flashback when it said there was this guy out there who healed his legs when he was an old man. But that was only necessary in the writing of this book so that he could have a reference later when he said, hey, what are you still doing here? And then Eric is like, oh, how did you know that I was here? Because now you can go back to that other moment and go, oh, they did run into each other before. But that is just poor planning, I feel like, because it's not... There's going to obviously be reconstruction of a plot to make it fit within the parameters, but I feel like this book tried to do too many things with how short it actually is. Anyway, we also got, like, oh, Shade's tit. I get that there's a certain personality behind this, but, like, that is not an 82-year-old dictator. I'm sorry. That does not, I should say, that does not have 82-year-old dictator, charismatic dictator energy to it. Anyway, so he's like, hey, what are you still doing here? And Eric's like, oh, well, this might make you think that I'm crazy, but the light actually told me to be here, wait for you, wait for a young man who looks just like you. And he's not entirely sure why or what his purpose is. He just knows that he was told by the light to be here. And he knows that this person looks like the person from his vision. So Eric asks what the guy's name is and says, oh, it's Dalen. And Eric is like, excuse me? You mean like Dalen the Conqueror, the guy that you also kind of look like? And he's like, yeah, but it's a common name, don't worry about it. That transitions into yeah, I'm just gonna follow you until otherwise instructed by the light. I don't have anything else to do. And Dalen is just like, you know what? I don't really mind. Okay. This is the moment where Dalen is actually reflecting on, hey, maybe I'm actually here because I'm supposed to do something better with my second chance. This is where I think that the realization should have happened first, because it also gives Eric the purpose of making Dalen think about things in a different way. It shows his influence immediately, as opposed to earlier when Dalen was all by himself, where he could have just been continuing on the same path that he was going, where he was just an enforcer, where he was just a selfish person. And then Eric brings that secondary thought of, hey, maybe I do have a purpose. Maybe I can be something better. And so then Dalen goes inside after thinking, hey, maybe he can be a better person. And the guy who gave him a ride on the wagon to the end of the earth is in there, Peridon, who is also kind of a neighbor. Peridon has found the journal, and the journal talks about how this was Dalen the Conqueror's house and how he was going off to kill himself. And then they all discover that Dalen right here is pretending to be Dalen's son, so that's who they're assuming him to be, Dalen's son. They're all mad because they're like, hey, wait a second, I talked to that guy. I should have recognized that guy's face. What the frick? I couldn't do it. But Eric also says that he should have known better. He is now here. He knows exactly what his mission is, and it is to help Dalen's son from not becoming exactly like his father and to guide him toward the light. Then we just immediately skip to the next day, which kind of sucks. This scene kind of cuts off, and I've noticed that a lot in recent books. Freaking, I swear swear, the book that I was reading yesterday, which there will be a book review for it soon. So many books cut off the book when the characters are about to have a powerful character moment or when they can actually talk something out, and instead just skip entirely through the closure on that moment. And it's just either insecurity, weak writing, or they don't understand pacing. And that's what happens here too. He says, I'm to ensure that you don't become like Daedalus the Conqueror. And Daedalus says, you're worried I might? And Eric says, honestly, yes. And then Dalen just, me too. And then that's just how it ends. Like, these two were gonna fight, and then that's just easily enough how it ends. Maybe see off this guy to show that these two have an understanding that this guy is gonna babysit this guy to make sure that this guy doesn't become like his dad, and this guy is obviously pissed off. Anyway. Next morning, Dalen is eating, and Dalen approaches, oh my gosh. Dalen approaches Eric and is basically like, look, my dad wasn't that bad. I have no idea how many people Dalen has killed in this iteration of the book. But Dalen is like, you know what? My dad wasn't that bad. I mean, the Dawn Empire, look at you. Look at you. So Eric is basically the same race as Kusik, who is the detective who is naked all the time, from the Naked Society. And Dalen is like, well, look, because the Dawn Empire had open borders and you were able to move around, your people were allowed to come here, and look, you're wearing clothing. So, like, my dad might have been bad. I might have been bad, is what the parenthesis says, but at least my society wasn't racist and allowed migrants to come in. Eric says, let's not credit the Dawn Empire with anything. And then Dalen, taking offense to that, goes, the metric systems, roads, education, the slave laws still in action, they all work. My father was a bastard. It doesn't mean that it was out wrong about everything. His open borders allowed people to move freely. Perhaps such freedoms brought his downfall. So maybe his only problem, that was the worst problem, was that he had open borders, but he educated everyone. He ended slavery. He was a good man, if not for the rape and murder. Just so you know. Anyway, after that little bit of an argument, which ends very, very quickly, by the way, he just goes and starts collecting all of his armor. He collects his old weapons, and then he explains to Eric, hey, I know that these are blood bonded to my father, and they're supposed to disappear when he dies, but that also says blood magic works. And you can pass these weapons on to somebody if your blood is close enough. So that's how he's tricking everybody that he is also not Dalen the Conqueror, but his son. They go outside, they start arguing because he also says, hey, BT dubs, I'm gonna wear this medal that says I am the freaking High Master Top Dragon G-Slice Biscuit of Fighting. As you can see, giant right here. I'm gonna wear this because it'll discourage people from fighting me, because I will be a G-Slice Dragon Monster Crusher High King Grandstand Master. So no one will want to fight me. And Eric is like, you're overstepping. You are not that powerful. You have not gone through the trials you have to wear that. And Dalen's like, I'm more powerful than anybody in the planet of the universe. And so they're going to go fight outside. And then they head outside, and his old rival or old buddy is out there. And so this is where we get to the part where it feels like the author inserting a character just for the sake of responding to critics. Now you tell me, okay? Now you tell me what you think about this character insert. Just recall that he is not in the first book. And a lot of the criticisms have to do with not believing that Dalen is actually sorry for any of his crimes, especially when, you know, he's trying to be an apologist for everything that he's done. Anyway, Eric says, the boy's father is dead. Who are you? And the new guy says, lies. I know the hilt of that sword. It's imperious. And if that is, in fact, Daedalus the Conqueror is still alive. And if that is intact, Daedalus the Conqueror is still alive. And he says, my father's links passed on to me, trespasser. He is dead, and you have no prize. Now leave, or I'll show you exactly what this sword can do. No, Sunicles don't work like that. It's impossible to give me Daedalus. Are you out of your mind? The child is right. I have a confession written by Daedalus' own hand. That's right, I'm gonna listen to the freaking charismatic dictator. But Imperious, you know I cannot lie, or I forfeit my power as a Lightbringer. Daedalus is dead. Then it must be. Tell me, boy, how did he die? He cast himself from the continent, ridding the world of Dallas the Conqueror once and for all. By the end, he was sorry for all of his crimes. Ha! You jest! That sniveling coward hid himself away until he was a withered old man. Being truly sorry is facing your crimes, boy, admitting your guilt before those that you have wronged. Now tell me, is that wrong? I don't know. I feel like if you're going to repent, I feel like if you're trying to ask for forgiveness for something, you don't hide from the bad things that you've done. You go, I'm sorry for this thing. Maybe it's because I have a childish understanding of this, because as a child, I was told that if you apologize to somebody, usually specifically name the thing that you think you did wrong so that they know you understand what you are apologizing for, because you want to address how you harmed somebody. You cannot address how you harmed somebody by constantly hiding from it. Now, also, maybe I'm wrong, because I got a bunch of people in my life that never apologize when they wrong me. They just pretend it never happened. So there is that. So maybe he really thinks that it is apologetic to just hide forever. But it also made me wonder in the novel that if the worst possible way for him to die and the most painful way for him to die was to throw himself off a cliff and die forever, then why was he so afraid of people knowing who he was? All that I can think is if people knew who he was, they would mob him and beat him and kill him in the streets, and it would be both humiliating and painful. But he avoided doing that. So do not try to feed me that I waited until I was 82 years old and I can't get my pecker up and my legs barely work. But you know what? I am feeling guilty. I think the porno that you kept on your nightstand just didn't work anymore, Dalen, and I think you got tired of not being able to jack it, so you threw yourself off the side of a cliff. That is what I think. So anyway, tell me what you think about this guy, because this guy feels like an insert to be like, look, it's not about talking to people, talking to the victims of your crimes. They have nothing to do with actually seeking forgiveness. Okay, so these guys fight, and this guy knows from seeing in his shirt, seeing the scars on his shoulder, that this is in fact Dalen. The fight is over very quickly, but you have this moment, which is, I actually like the layout of this image. I think this is a nicely done splash page, though his neck is bizarre. Like, I also want to compliment, this is a great splash page too. The reflections on the armor. So like there's some fun images in here, as you know, according to my style preferences. But this is a nice splash page, and there are many throughout this that are not terrible. Much better than anything from Rippaverse, that is for certain. But you get to this page here, and he says, "My old friend has come to take my life. Using my powers against him would be unjust. He deserves a fair fight. He deserves his revenge, but I deserve the punishment of living with my guilt even more." Why do you get to determine that, Dalen? Letting him kill me would be the easy way out, the same as killing myself like light cursed coward. So, Rhaegonor, please kill me if you can. If you do, when I resist in a fair fight, that has to be the light granting me release. Good, he's gotten better. So this, I hate this argument so much. He makes it all the time in the book where he's like, well, if the light wants me to die, then I will just die. And if it doesn't work, then obviously I'm not supposed to die. Now, if you are a completely wrong, narcissistic jackhole, you'll believe this, which I'm totally fine with Dalen genuinely believing this and being acknowledged as a jackhole. But this is the same sort of perspective as somebody going, if God doesn't want him to molest that child, then he will send somebody in the door to stop him from molesting that child. And if nobody stops him from molesting that child, well, then it was meant to be so. That's the same exact energy. No, you need to pay for your crimes if you are guilty. But going, look, beat me if I should possibly die, but I overpower all of you, so there's really no way for you to do that. Obviously, Dalen is going to overpower him, and this bothers me even more too, because this actually could have been a great character moment to give him a chance to do something else. He looked into the water earlier, and he said, oh my gosh, maybe I'm here to be better. He sees this guy. He could have got this guy on the ground, blade, to his throat somewhere, a nice tableau moment. And then they're looking in each other's eyes. They know exactly who the other is. And instead of Dalen stabbing this guy in the neck, knock him over the head to knock him out, have Eric be like, Dalen, no! You don't have to kill people. Do not be like your father. This man has not done anything to you. Do not kill him. And then have Dalen make that decision. to not kill this guy because he does not want to go down that path again. And he knows that he wronged this man by killing his family. Make him reflect, because you had that situation earlier where he said, I didn't betray, where he said, don't trust people. And Dalen took it to an extreme and thought that this guy was lying. So have Dalen reflect on who this guy was and how Dalen betrayed him by killing his family. And then have Ragnar new guy here be like, Dalen, I did not betray you. You killed my family on a lie. And then have Dalen let him go. And that would show such character growth and such character reflection instead of him just straight up murdering this guy. Oh, let's go back. Oh my gosh. Instead of Dalen straight up murdering this guy, where he doesn't need to, because this guy looks surprised. This guy is old. Just freaking knock him over. You don't gotta stab him with your freaking glove hand. And then be like, I'm so sorry. Again, it's like he's molesting somebody, and as the child is underneath him crying, he's like, I'm so sorry, I don't want to do this. I don't believe you. Your actions. This is something that I don't know if this author understands, because he didn't understand it in the book. And then sometimes the comments of the fans, which love it if you love it, but understand this. People lie. And sometimes it feels like you don't understand that people lie. They can say one thing and do the other, and their actions tell you that they don't believe what they're saying. This guy over here just stabbed a man who did nothing wrong to Dalen, but Dalen killed his entire family and then finished the job. And after stabbing him while he's 17 again, he's like, I'm so sorry. You could have made a different decision. And I don't understand why, if you want to put this on a path to creating a new background for Dalen, to giving him a second chance, to making him make different choices, why would you not have him look at this man, have Eric stop him instead of being a validating cuck standing right behind him to be like, you know what, it's gonna be okay, Dalen, you didn't do anything wrong, it was defensive. Make Eric actually stop validating Dalen. Everything Dalen did in the book was against Eric's beliefs. But Eric said, you know what? I'm a light bringer. I understand what the light is, and I validate your actions. I validate your murder because you're murdering the right people, Dalen. Then what is the point of Eric? He's not actually a consciousness that is meant to guide Dalen. He's just somebody there to approve Dalen so that Dalen thinks he's on the right path. We also get this piece of gold over here where all of these soldiers, which they're funny looking, it's great, but they're like, relent, your commander is slain, your order is negated, and they're like, hey, LMAO, we're gonna just head on back home, thanks a bunch. What the frick is this guy? This guy doesn't even want to be there. Which, fair, they're probably like, you know what, we just saw this man murder that guy, I want to go home to my wife and kids, like, no thank you, no thank you. Anyway, so then you get to this last page after Eric was validating Dalen's choice to murder a guy again, and we kind of get this feeling that it's gonna be monster of the week sort of thing, because it says, it seems the light has given me a second chance of life, a chance to bring some light to the world that I had drowned in darkness, but it is clear that I'll never escape my past, nor do I deserve to. I wonder what other old enemies I'll face in the journey. After all, there is an endless list of people I've wronged. Perhaps in our next encounter I can make amends, but only if they'll let me. So we're gonna get basically Monster of the Week, but I wish that he had actually just knocked that guy out and then they'd run, and he goes, this guy is gonna come back on me and I need to figure out a way to talk to him, because he is not going to give up. But make Dalen become a pacifist to dealing with this until he can't. Like, make a different choice, because that actually would have put the threat of this other thing and actually made it make sense of, oh, the light has given me another chance to do something different. So give it a consequence if he doesn't do what the light wants. Make him actually think about his actions. But we know that he won't. And we know that he is just going to have his feelings validated if he kills somebody. And that this guy is literally just there to be like, you know what? You are in the right, Dalen. Don't worry about it. Nobody is going to punish you, and you did what you had to do, so don't worry about it. So all I can say is it's kind of disappointing how messy the pacing is on this. I feel like I have so much more information that I can insert in there to make sense of things, because the scenes jump from page to page so much. It inserts some random stuff, and it's mostly disappointing. And there was so much potential here to do something different. Again, we don't have Lyra. We'll see her in the future, probably. Again, we don't have Lyra. We'll see her in the future. But the fact that she is set up as a love interest in this kind of hints at that she was supposed to be a love interest in the novel, which I don't even know how you would clarify, how you would try to fix the situation of somebody who was raped by an old man as a child and then became infertile was somehow going to become his love interest now that he was 17 again. Like, I don't hate this book. I don't hate the novel. I don't hate the comic. It's disappointing. There are certain things about the novel that are infuriating. The comic book feels like a wasted effort because it didn't get the attention that it could have had to be reinvented into something else and to make it make sense. It also doesn't feel long enough for what it needed to do in that first issue, and it skipped over doing what it needed to do. I also think that that moment where it had Lyra in the bed, I don't think that that was actually needed in that moment. I think that that would have been a better thing kept for the second issue or the third issue whenever Lyra comes in and he sees her for the first time and he goes, oh my gosh, that is the girl that I used to love. And I haven't seen her since that one night that I told her to be gone. She doesn't even know that I love her. Like, that would have been a better introduction rather than putting it into this random spot in book 1, which feels like it's kind of a dump of a bunch of exposition to try to set up this character instead of just giving us what we need in that moment to set up his immediate needs. Again, I think the situation with that hobo guy in the streets could have had much more setting to create what a monster he is and to like make that as a contrast. So you've got him becoming a young person again. And immediately his first reaction is freaking murder this guy who just not even did anything wrong to him. Like, just stepped on him, asked him for a bit of money, whatever. Like, don't even make that guy a threat to him. Have that guy just be like, hey, those are some nice clothes. You got any money? And then Dalen's like, did you say to me? And then just stabs the crap out of him and makes him pay for it. And that shows the brutality of Dalen the Conqueror. And then he washes himself off, and his biggest issue is like, oh my gosh, they're finding that body. I need to GTFO. And then he meets Eric, and then Eric talks to him and has that moment with him. And then you get that moment at the end with his old buddy where he makes a different decision, and you can reflect it on the earlier decision that was his impulse, where he had been tapping into that impulse later, but having Eric there got him to slow down, stop, and do something else. And I think that the saddest thing for this entire series, for the novel and for the comic book, is that there is so much potential between the comments that are actually about the book and all of the different ideas that have been shared in the comment section on my book review. There are so many different ways to have taken this story and made it so deep and so interesting. And it just feels like the author is not getting the feedback that he needs, or listening to the feedback if he gets any, to craft it into something that makes sense, into something powerful, into something meaningful. It's just taking this tyrant badass thing and then, lowering the sexual assault because he realized that he couldn't come back from the sexual assault and make a love interest out of a sexual assault victim. Instead of making something strong. Another thing that I want to mention briefly is that as a writer, as a creator of any kind, we will never get away from the influences of our lives, from the framework of our lives, from what we believe actually going into our work. It's the things that we think are always going to find their way in there one way or another, usually in a spiritual way, or how you frame good guys and bad guys, in a very broad sort of way. Your beliefs, your ideas, your spirituality will go into your work. With my work, you will often find stuff that is about found family, that is about alienation, that is about being broken and hopefully finding, ways to come together to build that family, to heal. I think all three of my books, Dead End Drive, Body More, and Boom Boom Boom, all have a focus that the family is stronger and makes you stronger, and is the thing that you can rely on, even if it's not blood relatives, because both Dead End Drive and Body More have found family in them. And then if we talk about the Westies is all about found family after the kids have they're alone. And so that's something that you will find in a lot of my work. You will also find that a lot of my work might have some depressing things in them or deal with death and being alienated, but they are not hopeless. They are not about you will always be alone, you will suffer, and you will die alone. they always have a spark of hope underneath the bottom, because I believe that there is always hope. So there are these larger concepts that will always find their way into your work because of the things that you believe. And why do I say that? Because I don't think that it is fair to go after somebody because of their religion. I don't care what the religion is. People are allowed to believe and have the faith that they generally believe in, and that is going to just influence their work, and that is fine. But it takes us to a thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to insult you if you have no sex in your work or fade to black in your work, like Brandon Sanderson. I went through a situation where people were telling me that there is no sex in Brandon Sanderson's books, period, because it didn't get into graphic sex. And then they said he only didn't put sex in his books because he was Mormon. But then I find out that there is sex, it's just not graphic sex. But it's not just the religious that don't necessarily enjoy that. The same thing with Twilight, where critics were going after Bella for dressing modestly and saying that's only because she's crazy Mormon. Look, I'm not asking anybody, and there's nothing that I can do to change anybody's mind. I'm just saying, I'm not asking anybody to like any religion whatsoever. I'm not asking anybody to like or approve of or do anything for anything. I'm just saying it gets kind of exhausting and diminutive to mistreat people because of their religious beliefs, even if you don't agree with them. What you're always going to find in books is people who have different perspectives, different views, and those lace into the values of the stories and of the characters. We can analyze that. We can analyze where those ideas come from and how they manifest in these stories. But I think making personal attacks on a person because of their specific choices sort of crosses a boundary for me. You don't really see people going, oh, of course they wrote this character in there because they're secular, because they're atheists, because they're agnostic, because they're Buddhist, because they're Islamic, because they're Shintoist. Like, yes, of course, you're going to have those ideas in there, and it's fine. But using that as something to attack somebody for, instead of seeing the work as itself, look, if a book doesn't work, has nothing to do with their religion. And so, I guess I'm bringing this up because I see it happen. I've seen it happen over a couple of different things now, and I want to have conversation about the books, about the people. I want to have conversations about the books, about the stories, and then to find the similarities or the influences in the works versus the creator. And this is also why I love hearing from the creator's perspective, so then I can start connecting dots as to what influenced what. But I think it creates a very hostile environment for book reviews and conversations when you start making personal attacks out of the book reviews. Now, obviously, me saying anything is not going to change anything. People are obviously allowed to and going to and should express themselves however they want. But because there is so much vitriol around just talking about some of these books, I did want to make it clear that this is just a book review. This is just talking about the fiction, about the story layout, because I love the stories. I love talking about characters, and I could really see so much potential in Shadow of the Conqueror, but I don't think that there is an environment right now that is conducive to accepting or seeing criticism for what it is, because there are also so many personal attacks involved in looking at criticism, and you don't know who to trust. And it also then just, everything becomes bad faith. That's bad faith. That's bad faith. If you like it, then it's good. If you don't like the person, then it's good. If you don't like the person, then it's bad. There is so much of that. Anyway, I might have a longer video about criticism and the culture around criticism on Saturday, because I've been thinking about it recently. We'll see. I know there might be one in the future, but I am thinking Saturday. But anyway, let me know what your thoughts are about Shadow of the Conqueror down in the comments below. Have you read the novel? Have you read the graphic novel? What do you think about the adaptation? What do you think about changes being made between the two versions? Do you think that the changes are good? Do you wish that the changes hadn't been made? What kind of changes do you usually expect with adaptations? Let me know your thoughts on any of it down in the comments below. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it,
But as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?